Hello, I am Brian Gronkowski, or Mr. G, director at Plano East Theater. I am so excited to welcome you into the 2024-2025 school year here at Plano East Senior High School. At Plano East Theater, we want you to feel supported, empowered, and able to articulate your needs as an artistic collaborator. For this reason, we use boundary practices to help us create a collaborative environment where all participants feel supported. In this presentation, I will introduce to you our department boundary practices, explain the reasons why we are doing these practices, and give you a preview of the sort of activities we will be doing during the first few weeks of class to help us establish boundaries and build trust. My hope is that you not only get a better understanding of your boundaries, but that you know how to communicate those boundaries. The information in this presentation is largely the work of Theatrical Intimacy Education, or TIE, specifically the work of Chelsea Pace, Laura Reichart, and Kim Shively. Other information can be credited to intimacy directors and coordinators, IDC. Further materials have come from my experiences at University of Idaho pursuing my MFA in theater. Costume sheet comes from Kara Eggers, professor of intimacy education at University of Idaho. Let's get into it. What is the boundary practice? You have boundaries over many things, but we are specifically going to be discussing physical boundaries. The boundary practice is a set of tools from TIE that help us clearly establish boundaries during rehearsals, classes, and productions. The boundary practice consists of physical exercises supported by verbal. The boundary practice consists of button, boundary check-in, and other tools used to communicate choreography and blocking. You may be asking, why are we doing this, Mr. G? There are many reasons. For me, it creates a supportive space where individuals feel free to communicate their needs to each other. It also helps us to establish the trust needed for successful collaboration. Our productions are highly collaborative. Not only do I want you to be able to understand what your boundaries are, I want you to be aware of the boundaries of others. On top of all of this, I hope you leave Plano East Theater feeling empowered to communicate your boundaries and be a self-advocate. What does this look like at Plano East Theater? To lay the foundation for boundary practices at Plano East Theater, we begin working on them in the first few weeks of school. I will go into greater detail about each of these in the following slides, but here are the tools we use in our boundary practices. Saying no, button, boundary practice. Here we also will refer to them as boundary check-ins, and tools we use for blocking and choreography in almost everything we do here at Plano East. These tools include opening and closing distance, levels of touch, tempo, destination, and eye contact. We use our boundary practices in everything we do during classwork, scene work, and rehearsals, even when there might not even be touch called for. I want you to be familiar with them before we begin. So here we go. We begin our boundary practice acknowledging the power of the word no. Maybe we don't like saying no to people. It may make us feel uncomfortable. We acknowledge the power of the word no in class. We will engage in games and activities to help us to get used to saying no. Boundary practice only works if no is an option. As we explore these games that invite us to learn how to say no, I invite you to allow yourself to sit with any discomfort you may be feeling saying no. It's okay. We reflect after every game session to allow for open communication about how saying no might land for you. The next thing we use is the word button. Button can be called by anyone at any time in order for us to take a pause. You can think of it like calling for line. Once button is paused, we take a collective breath, and the person who called button decides what happens next. Whether it is to pause for a moment, ask a clarifying question, maybe discussing a boundary, or taking a much needed break. It is completely up to the person who called for button. In the first few weeks, we will play a few games to help us practice saying button. Games we will play involve variations of Simon Says, the warm-up focus game, Yes, and the improv game, What Are You Doing? The goal of these games is to help you feel more comfortable saying button. After we lay the foundation of destigmatizing the word no and establishing button, then we begin to work on the check-in. The check-in involves a physical practice followed by verbal reinforcement. Before we talk about the check-in, we should go over a few things. When we talk about our bodies in physical space and in our choreography and blocking moments, we refer to our bodies using desexualized language, such as front of chest, front of pelvis, back of pelvis, and hips. Avoiding sexualized language helps us make the space more comfortable for everyone. It also helps us to be more precise with our language. During the check-ins at the beginning of the year, you will have an opportunity to get comfortable using this precise language. In order to also complete a check-in, you must know where your boundaries are. You will each receive a color sheet created by University of Idaho Professor of Intimacy, Kara Eggers. This will help you think about your boundaries before you demonstrate them to others. You will use red to indicate where no touch is allowed, yellow to indicate where touch can happen if we have a conversation about it, and green to help indicate places where you are okay receiving touch. This color sheet is just an exercise for you to use to help you identify and get you to start thinking about your boundaries, especially if you haven't thought about it yet. Your boundaries will be different each time you do a check-in, and they will be different for each and every partner you check in with. This color sheet serves only as an exercise for you to begin to think about your boundaries, especially if you haven't thought about it yet. Once you have an understanding of your boundaries, you can do a body map on yourself. It is helpful to practice this body map on yourself so that you can get used to the idea of having touch on your body. With open palms, you will smooth over with your hands, you'll smooth over the green areas. When you get to a place that is not green, you will make a clear physical distinction boundary by extending your hands and creating a bubble or a fence. I will demonstrate. I'm green, 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 and then at my ears, I'm going to create a bubble and then resume the green. That bubble that I created will show my partner eventually where a fence exists. These fences were developed by TIE, and they determine yellow or red areas. Red areas are off limits completely, but there may be some yellow areas where a conversation might have to happen first, such as a hug using the front of the chest, which would normally be yellow. This will help later on when you check in with your partners. Once you have body mapped your own body, you will then be ready for our partner check-ins. A partner check-in happens at the beginning of every partner activity, in class, in rehearsal, before performances. Every time you work with another person, you will need to check in with them. The check-in is a way for you to share your boundaries with each other. It's helpful to view the boundary check-in as a way for you to honor each other's boundaries with respect. To begin, partners stand in neutral positions while facing each other. Without using words, partner A begins by using wiping, sweeping, or smoothing motions to communicate where you permit your partner to touch you today. As you did in the body mapping activity, you will communicate your fences using the bubbles. This will help your partner to see your yellow and red areas. I'm going to demonstrate a bubble around my ears again. You want to make your bubbles as dramatic as possible so that you are taking your time. I also want to offer that we are using slow, traceable motions as we are exploring our body mapping to our partners. If we go too fast, they may have trouble keeping up with all of the different areas of the check-in. Once partner A has completed their body mapping, partner A will then ask permission for partner B to touch their hands. If permission is granted, partner A takes partner B's hands and places them on all of the places you allowed them to touch you today. At any moment, you can call button in this exercise. So if you take their hand, it's basically placing your hand on top of theirs. Now, variations of this can be B's hand on top of A's hand, or B hovering over A's hand as they trace. Or you can do a variation where B is tracing, following A's hands. Or another variation can be B mirroring A's body mapping as they complete it. Any of the variations may be used. After this part of the check-in, partner B now names the bubble areas or the fences they noticed. These are the yellow or red areas. This is the time for asking clarifying questions or addressing anything that still needs to be discussed. both partners should agree on partner A's body map. If all questions are answered, the check-in resumes with partner B demonstrating their body mapping to partner A. Partner B then asks to take partner A's hands and use variations if needed. During check-ins, always keep in mind, you are always able to call for button. You may call for button and say something like, I want to skip to the feet. Boundaries are specific to the day, the time, and the partner you are checking in with. Boundaries can change even after a check-in. They can change at any time. As we become comfortable with check-ins, they only take a few moments to complete, but they are crucial for building trust and respect between partners. Other tools we will become familiar with during the first few weeks of our boundary practices include opening and closing distance, levels of touch, tempo, destination, and eye contact. We will explore each of these with activities to help us understand how they might be useful when we self-block scenes with our partners during scene study, or when I am communicating as a director to actors. These tools give us the shared language we can use to communicate blocking, choreography, choreographing moments of intimacy, and other things. As we wrap up, I wanted to reiterate the reasons why we're doing this important work, the boundary practice. We want everyone to feel supported in this space. We recognize the importance of establishing trust in order to collaborate. We also want you to understand and respect your own boundaries, as well as the boundaries of others. Finally, we want to empower you to communicate your own boundaries as you serve as your own self-advocate in the future. I am so fortunate to be your director, and I cannot wait to engage in this work with you all. Looking forward to it.